Welcome to the Gold Medal Excellence Podcast. I'm your host, Alexander Payne, along with my co-host, Chris Asher.
How are you?
Program, we're going to talk about the decline of African Americans in baseball. This is probably going to be a multi-part series, and we're planning to have some guests on as well to give their own personal insights and ideas as to why there is a lack of African Americans playing baseball nowadays. This is a very, very controversial and hot topic around the baseball and also around sports in general, why African Americans are shying away from baseball nowadays versus before. So this is gonna be we're gonna talk about a lot of different factors that go into it. A lot of different ideas are being tossed out, and it's gonna take probably several parts of this series to dive in as to all the different issues that are shaping African Americans' decisions to leave baseball.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The demise of African Americans in baseball is people have seen it. If you look, it's the one sport that you don't see a lot of African American participation in a professional level. If you take away like international soccer, and things like that. But you look at the NFL, the NBA, huge African American populations, and baseball used to be one of the biggest, and now you see a huge lack of African American participation. So before we go on, one of the biggest deals I want to say is I remember during the World Series a few years ago when Dodgers won the COVID year, and they interviewed Mookie Betts, and they said, "Mookie Betts, do you realize you're the only African American baseball player playing here?" And he was like, "No, I didn't know that," which shows the demise of baseball in the African American community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think probably for me, my personal opinion, one of the major factors is I think baseball is still by nature racial bias. It's predominantly a white sport still. Even though Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier in 1947, we've had a lot of Hall of Famers who are Black players since then, but still baseball has always been and always will be a predominantly white sport. And there are people who still have bias and give privileges towards white people in this sport versus Black people.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know everything, but I would like to say, yeah, it looks on the surface. I work with a lot of athletes like you, parents. I've got a lot of parents I've coached and their kids play. It seems to be the one sport that is still controlled more by a white population or upper class population. And in I've heard it from parents. I've heard it how challenging it is if you have a person of color on the team. You try to be like the best people play, but you start hearing stories about, you got to have this much money to play on this travel team. You got to have this. You got to come up from they're in their leagues. You got to do everything right to be considered. So I'm sure you got some questions, but yeah, it looks to be a challenge, and I don't think. And this might be a topic that's a little controversial, but just look at the numbers. I mean, besides hockey, and like, obviously hockey there's not a lot of Black people, but there's just not a lot of top flight athletes, African American athletes playing baseball. And I think if they were, you'd see more numbers there.
Yeah. I think Black athletes are phenomenal athletes and their skills can translate very well in the baseball field. I think the sport of baseball is definitely missing out on the lack of African Americans and that type of talent that would serve very well in the baseball field.
Yeah. So when I was growing up, I grew up. I was born in '74, so I'm getting old now. I'm almost 49, getting to 50. But when I was growing up, the people I saw was Chili Davis, Darryl Strawberry, Eddie Murray, Ozzie Smith. Even later on, Bo Jackson and Deion Sanders, guys who are really popular now, and they played baseball, and you just don't see that now. You don't see and there's many reasons for that. But you don't see those. You don't see Major League Baseball having those African American stars anymore. And if you look at the metrics, and I haven't looked at all the numbers, but if you look at what Major League Baseball is trying to do, it seems like they're trying to get that, like, hey, we got to get back here. I recall Kyler Murray getting drafted by the A's, and then he's the 1% of 1%. I would tell parents, if you can get your kid there, he's the 1% of 1%. And Kyler Murray, it was known that the Oakland A's and Major League Baseball sent a contingent to him after he was drafted, and they tried to convince him not to play football and to play baseball, and they were going to try to market him as the biggest guy in the league. And if I've looked at stuff recently, and I look at their posters and stuff, one of the biggest guys they've tried to market, and he's young, another young guy, and I wouldn't say African American, but definitely black, from a Latino or a different background, is like the guy from the Padres, Tatis Jr. When you see Major League Baseball stuff, he's all over the place. They're trying to market him. So it seems like Major League Baseball knows they have a problem in like the African American or black community, and they're trying to do things to get that up.
I do think Major League Baseball also, just from a talent level and factory perspective, that they've kind of shifted more into grooming Latin Americans rather than black people into becoming the next generation of baseball stars. You got like Tatis Jr., you got Manny Machado, you got so many Latin American stars from the island coming in, and they go into Major League Baseball organizations. They take care of you, they feed you, they develop you. Juan Soto is another example. Just different guys like that. I think probably the biggest hotbed is more in Latin America now rather than African Americans.
I say you're absolutely right. I also say in those other countries, the sports are like soccer, and then there's a one-off. So in the Latin American countries, it's like soccer and baseball, or even in the Caribbean countries, cricket and baseball or soccer. In the United States right now, the NBA and the NFL is king, and the NBA is number 2 by far. I would say, so that would be correct in your analysis, I would say, but I think those countries are more like, this is what we're going to be really good in. We're going to develop baseball. We're going to develop, maybe soccer, whatever. I think some of the biggest problems with baseball, especially in inner city, growing up in inner city, was all those players I mentioned earlier. There were fields, there were parks, there were places you could play. And then, you had drugs, you had crack coming to inner city, you had inner city schools just couldn't afford baseball. I think that was a big part. Like basketball, you just throw some basketballs out, they can play. I don't know how to compare it to football, because football is expensive too, but maybe it was a little cheaper because obviously they're doing it football. But baseball, you had the bats cost a lot, the balls cost a lot, you needed to have fields. And then in those communities, they were overrun. They didn't have any fields. I think that was a big part of it. When Darryl Strawberry and Ozzie Smith and them were growing up in Watts and stuff, they played baseball, number 1 sport. If you look at Ozzie Smith, he played basketball. I think Coach Stramman said Ozzie Smith played basketball. He had 30 one night. Tony Gwynn. Tony Gwynn was my hero growing up. Tony Gwynn was like, he played at Long Beach Poly. He played at San Diego, so he played basketball and baseball. So I think they had a lot more facilities. And I also think once the game shifted to where the blacks, they didn't have the little leagues in the inner city. You couldn't go to Dorsey or Crenshaw area and play baseball and develop the game. They didn't have the money, or like I said, it was overrun with gangs or drugs, and you just lost that audience. But the other thing I've heard is it's just a boring game. And if you're not older like me, it is a boring game. So I think like the African American kids are like, I like basketball, I like football, I like track. It's more exciting. But you can't tell me there's not an amazing amount of African American baseball talent out there.
Yeah, for sure. Like, they're definitely, athleticism and skill level can translate well into the sport. But I gotta be honest, like even hardcore fans like myself and I recently had Alex Rodriguez as high school coach on the podcast as well a few weeks ago, and we've all said that even we don't watch baseball anymore because it's too boring. You know, it's more of like a showcase style of sport. Guys are trying to hit home runs and trying to throw as hard as they can. The whole art of like fundamentals and manufacturing runs, such as like bunting and stealing and hit and run and those type of little cat and mouse games and poke and run games are all lost arts in the game now. And when guys are just striking out way too much, and it just gets really, really boring, very, very boring. It takes a long time for guys to put the ball in play. And like even like old scouts who have watched the game for 40, 50 years have said that the last like 5 years or so, this brand of baseball has just become unbearable to watch. And if the hardcore fans really are shying away from the game and not really interested in watching the game, then how do you get the casual fans to watch baseball?
Yeah, and the price has changed. When I was a kid, the first I grew up in Inglewood, but I remember the first thing I ever went to was a Dodger game, and it was cheap back then. And like I said, all the Dodger players, the good ones, not all of them, but we had guys like Manny Mota. You know, like I remember these guys. Like we had Garvey, we had Ron Say, we had all these amazing guys. But we also had great players like Davey Lopes. Like I said, Darryl Strawberry. We had all these exciting black players. So you would go to the park and watch them. But I think, like you said, the game is slower. I think you took a whole generation of players. You probably took a 20-year, you probably took from the early 1990s to the early 2000s or maybe late 80s to early 2000s where you lost a whole generation of African American players. They don't even know the game anymore. And even my friends who I talked to, I'll be like, let's go to Dodger game. Like, man, it's boring. I don't want to go to that. Like in the African American community, I can tell you, unless you're a big Dodger fan or you know you don't have someone drawing you to the game, you're like, I don't want to go see this. I don't want to go sit here for 3 hours. So I do think Major League Baseball's cleaning up a little bit. I watched a Dodger game the other night. They got that 20-second pitch clock. I literally, usually a Dodger game or a baseball game you watch on TV, it might be, I would say a low end was 3 hours to 4 hours, you know, even 4.5 hours. And I watched a Dodger game last week, and in the fifth inning, after the fifth inning, it was only an hour. Like I think the game started at 7 at 8 o'clock. They were in the fifth inning, and I was like, "Whoa!" So I think Major League Baseball has recognized their problem. I think they're like, "We need to speed this game up. It's too slow. It's too boring." Especially if you're going to get people who are fans of the NFL and NBA. Those games are much faster, you know.
Mm-hmm. So I think another problem that has been giving African Americans little incentive to play baseball is also the differences in college scholarships. Like basketball and football give full ride scholarships to
Mhm.
universities, but baseball has to give partials because of Title IX. Because the other two revenue sports give full ride. So most baseball recruits get half or quarter scholarships. You know, the very highly touted recruits get 75 to 85%.
Mhm.
And the few like select very elite, you know, blue chip 5-star guys get 90% or higher for baseball, but not many guys can be that elite blue chip guy to even get 90%. And then many of these African American families still can't pay even the 5 to 10% leftover percentage for the tuition at colleges, let alone, you know, half of the full boat of a college. So that's probably a big reason why they would pick basketball or football.
Yeah, I would say absolutely. So basketball, football, when you're dealing with the NCAA, that's considered a head count sport. So if basketball gets 15 scholarships. If you give a kid a scholarship, that's just one. You know, if you give another kid, that's two. Baseball, track and field, some other sports, wrestling, volleyball, those are for men at least. Those are called equivalency sports. So, like you said, a really good baseball player might get 50%. So if I'm a football player and they're going to give me 50% in baseball, I'm not going to go play baseball unless I get a football scholarship and I do both. Or if I get drafted, or if I get drafted, I'm going to the pros like Mookie Betts. Like I'm just gonna go. You know, I'm gonna get paid. So that's a huge deal. Um, like I also said, I think it's been taken so far out of the inner city and some of the other communities that it's almost a pay for play. That's what I have seen or seen from parents. as a college coach, I had walk-ons who would be on my track team. If they beat my scholarship guys, I'd put them on the relay or I'd run them. It was just like they beat you. I don't know if that happens in baseball. You know, if I'm a kid or a parent, I pay 50 grand for my kid to go up to your program, and some other kid comes in and he's better or just as good or a little better, but he hasn't paid, I probably not playing that guy. I hear that. I don't, is that real? I don't know, but I've heard a lot of parents who I know and trust, and they're like, these are things that are out there. You know, hey, my kid's been at this, you know, program. You know, he's much better than this or that. And I understand parents, but you know, I know some athletes. I know some athletes, some parents, some good parents. They got good athletes or kids, and I'll just hear the political stuff. Like it's hard to make it there. You know, if you're a superstar like Kyler Murray, you're gonna make it anywhere. If you're Bo Jackson, you're gonna, you know, you're gonna make it anywhere. If you're Deion Sanders, you're gonna make it anywhere. But when did for Major League Baseball and college baseball to really evolve and get back to the top of the big three, because it's called America's pastime, but I wouldn't call it America's pastime right now. Right now, the NFL owns everything. The NFL owns Sundays. They got Sundays on lock. They got Thursdays on lock now. Thursday night football. They got Monday. Baseball had I think they've been doing themselves a disservice. They have right now, baseball's besides the NBA playoffs, baseball is the only thing going on in hockey playoffs. Excuse me, baseball. So besides NBA and hockey playoffs, they're the only thing going on. And then after hockey and baseball, hockey and basketball ends, Major League Baseball has like a month or two where they just run everything. So it should be more popular. Like they basically got all of July to middle of August to, you know, get all these people because it's the only sport on. There's nothing else on. And they're on ESPN. They're on it. So, and I know for a fact, I mean, what kid doesn't like to play baseball? So something's holding it, something's holding it back, if you ask me.
Yeah. I think Major League Baseball could do a better job of just advertising the game. Like they've gotten so much better in the last 5 years. Like 5 years ago, they were so unbelievably bad and way behind the times. But in the last 5 years, they've taken major leaps and bounds forward, but it's still a long ways behind the NBA and the NFL for sure. I think just the NBA and NFL, it's become clockwork for them in terms of marketing and really getting the fans hooked on the sport. Major League Baseball is still up and coming on figuring out ways to improve their marketing. And there are still African Americans in Major League Baseball. Like, let's go off top of the head. Andrew McCutchen, Mookie Betts, Byron Buxton, Giancarlo Stanton, Marcus Stroman, and Marcus Semien. So those are 6 guys that if Major League Baseball wants to bring light into African Americans, they have 6 guys already to start with that they can market and advertise very, very well, and then really draw the Black audience into getting interest in baseball.
I'm a Dodger fan, so I'm not being a homer, but I would say Mookie Betts would probably be your biggest draw in the African American community. I don't even think they do a good enough draw with him in LA. I mean, you know, you still hear more about LeBron. I mean, the Dodgers have just won the World Series. Mookie Betts is the LA Dodgers lead the league in attendance. I remember when they won the World Series, you couldn't find a Mookie Betts jersey. To me, baseball should have seized on that. Like, we got a superstar. We can build around this guy. Same thing I said they see it with Tatis. I think they saw it with Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray's a big deal. I read all the articles as he was coming up. He got drafted. Major League Baseball sent a contingent to him like, we want to market you. We want to make you the future of the game. So imagine a guy like Kyler Murray and his dad, where Major League Baseball is like, we're going to make you the star of the game, the future of the game. They said to Kyler Murray and his dad, we're going to fast track you to the majors. We're going to make sure at the end of the first or second year, you have to be in the majors because the NFL wants you. We don't want you in a minor league bus. We know if you go to minors, you're not going to stay. And he still picked football, which is a much more violent game, but he is the quarterback. You know, he is the guy there. But that shows where I think Major League Baseball are starting to figure it out. Like we've got to, they're missing a significant majority of the audience. They still have a older white male audience. I love it right now. I see the Dodgers. We got a couple black players besides Mookie, and I'm like, this is great. But it's only a couple. They're only sprinkled around. So, um, I think they just got to get. They need to do more outreach. They need to do more development. Um, you know, that's just my opinion. They need to let players know they're accessible. We want the best talent has to rule out. I don't think a kid should. I shouldn't have a parent go, man, my kid played baseball and he's better than all the other kids. And even the coaches say it, and some of the other parents say it, and he's not playing because he didn't come up to their grassroots system, or he didn't have the money, or necessary. He's not politically correct in a way. So
Yeah, look at like even in Little League, the Jackie Robinson West team had won the US title almost 10 years ago now, but then they had to forfeit all their wins after they found that they used some ineligible players from outside the Chicago area. But that just shows that like baseball still matters to kids in the inner city, but it just shows another example of how like sometimes the sport gets kind of scoffs when they see like black athletes succeeding in the game of baseball.
yeah, I would say the majority of baseball's fan base is older, male, Caucasian, fan base. If you look at baseball TV, it's still dominated. You have the Latino players or the Hispanic players. You have a few black players, but it's still a white male dominated sport. And some people want to keep it that way. Um, I understand, but to grow it, you have to, you have to leave that niche. You have to grow the game. It's just a new generation. Social media, it's like baseball still stuck in the 80s or whatever. To deal with social media and all this stuff. You need superstar athletes with swag. You need Deion Sanders. Deion Sanders would be the perfect guy that would be great in baseball if he was playing right now. You hear him about football, Colorado. I love Deion Sanders playing baseball. Man, I loved it because he played football. And man, this dude's a football guy. But then I see him play baseball. Like, man, this dude's playing baseball. I want to go play baseball. Deion's playing it. He don't even need to play it. Same thing, Bo Jackson. Bo Jackson was a Heisman Trophy winner. Oh man, Bo decided to play baseball. I feel like they didn't run with that, or they got to that niche for those players, and but besides those guys, the last legitimate superstar that was African American that I can remember in baseball is Ken Griffey Jr.
He'd be great for today's day and age as well because he had
He'd
great
be he'd
swag.
be great for today, and he was great for that age, but they didn't market him the way they should have. And it's like I said, you haven't marketed. You have to market that if you want to grow the game, you have to market that to like the inner city. You have to develop in the inner city. They've done a better job. They've got it like in Compton or LA. They've got the Compton leagues. They've started to get away. Major League Baseball and baseball in general, I think, knew. Um, we have an inner problem in inner city, so they're developing that. They're doing a lot more stuff, developing leagues, developing parks, developing systems for African American players and non-white players to play. It just seems more of a class sport of the big three than anything else. It seems much more pay to play, and a lot less opportunity unless you are just a superstar athlete. I don't know if a kid of color is getting as much developmental opportunity as a kid that's coming up playing their whole life. And this could go for club soccer and other sports as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because baseball in the old days used to convince like those gritty, tough black football players from inner city to actually pick baseball because of the longevity and much lower injury risk. Like one example is Carl Crawford. He had a football scholarship to Nebraska, but some guys in the baseball community had convinced him to play professional baseball out of high school because just the longevity and just you have less risk of injury. He was also from the inner city. Just a lot of real athletic, fast, physical guys with raw skills were seen as like high ceiling guys in baseball, and then they can develop their skills later while still harnessing their strength. That used to be like the way of thought of convincing all black athletes, like Darryl Strawberry. Eric Davis was another big one. I think he had a basketball scholarship to Arizona
Mhm.
State. He was going to play basketball with like Byron Scott, but the baseball guys had convinced him that you can play baseball longer, have much lower injury risk. But it's just a little different nowadays. A lot of the black athletes now look at football and basketball. They feel like it's more of like a brighter light stage than minor league baseball. Like, oh, I could play football or basketball like Florida or Ohio State, get a free college education, be on ESPN, national TV, versus like if you play minor league baseball, you just eat PB&Js every day and trying to hit like a 97-mile-an-hour fastball in the middle
Mhm.
of nowhere. So I think,
Well, yeah, that's the other deal. I mean, that was a big deal too. Even you look, I say Kyler Murray or Deion or both. Um, you got to go to a minor league grind. So baseball is already a challenge. Even if you get drafted first round, you might have to go through a 2 year or 3 year minor league grind. So they're already behind the eight ball because if I'm Kyler Murray, Arizona Cardinals pick me at #1 overall quarterback. I'm starting day one. Not only am I starting day one, I'm getting 40-50 million dollars, and then I'm going to get a new contract after year 3 or 4, and that's going to go to 100 million. So it used to be, oh man, baseball's the safest bet, you can do it, but not if you're a quarterback, because Kyler Murray's going to make much more money playing football than he ever would make playing baseball, and he doesn't have to deal with that minor league grind. You know, now the baseball money's guaranteed, which helps. But who wants to take that bus, or who wants to sit 2 or 3 years in a minor? Same thing, basketball, college basketball is one and done. All right, I can go to Duke for a year, or UCLA or Kentucky for a year and go to the pros. If it doesn't work out, I can go to Europe. I can go to Europe and even if I don't have grades, I can go to Europe or the D League or whatever, and I can develop and then go pro after 1 year. So, you know, I will say it's the hardest sport to make it in pro baseball. You've got to go through you got to get drafted. You got to go through the minor leagues. And even the kids, it is less of a risk, I think, of being injured. But even those kids, but you can get injured, and but it takes much longer to make the big dollars. So those are some challenges they're dealing with. If I'm Deion Sanders, am I going to go play for the Yankees if I got to sit for 2 years in the minors, but the Atlanta Falcons are paying me, first round draft pick? I'm starting. I'm going to the Pro Bowl. Like, am I going to? I'll do it under my circumstances. That's why I like Deion and Bo. They did it under their circumstances. Like Bo Jackson knew I can go play football right away. I'm starting. I'm the best guy. Deion Sanders started immediately, and I would even say the Yankees fast tracked him, and other schools fast tracked. They were like, "This guy's fast, and we don't put him out there. He's just not going to play. He's not going to sit in the minors." So if you're not that guy, you've made it harder. So they've got to figure out some ways. You know, they've got to figure out some ways. But what I'm saying is, it's a great game. It's a great sport. I love it. I go watch it. Uh, I think they're figuring out some things, but they got to continue. I would say they've lost a lot of the big. You still see some African American fans at Dodger games. I go, but it's not. If you had half the roster being African American, or even a quarter, you probably have a lot more African American fans buying jerseys and stuff. You get what I'm saying? So, um, I think it starts at the grassroots level of the coaches. But this is just talking. This is things I see, and you may see, and hopefully they develop from there. But I'd like to see it done.
hmm Yeah, definitely. That's part of why, like, even younger black stars like Monet Davis was a great Little League player, but then ended up ultimately choosing basketball long term as her preferred sport of choice. So that's another one. And then also, as you were saying, like sports like cross country and track are the only real pure sports in the game where it's all about times and just your marks. It's much, much harder to get bias or do corruption in those sports because it's much more pure and hardcore. It's all in hard facts. But in the other sports like football, basketball, or baseball, the playing time and who's good and who's better can be very subjective. Like you could be a really good player, but then the coach or recruiter might pick somebody else and they're not breaking any rules or it's all very subjective. And I mean, coaches do have their preferred choices or favorites or whatever. They have their own ideas, and maybe they get caught up in their vision. And if someone disrupts that vision, maybe coaches get real frustrated and they want to really make that vision come to life rather than having another come in and like disrupting it by outshining someone he thought would be good. Just things like that could really discourage athletes from playing these team sports. But then you go to like cross country or track, you have more fun because it's more pure.
Yeah, I mean, cross country, track, swimming, wrestling. I always tell people when you go to those sports, it's straight up. There's no bias. You race, that guy beat you. You wrestle, that guy beat you. You swam, that guy beat you. Baseball, football, basketball, either they can say, "Oh, this guy's better than you," or "Your quarterback wasn't good." He didn't. Whatever. You can make up excuses, or you can. But it's those other sports don't pay though, and they're a lot harder. Like track, it's a lot harder to get track scholarship. It's a lot harder to get a scholarship in cross country or probably swimming. I know it's hard to get one in wrestling. They're like the lowest on the totem pole in collegiate athletics or men's volleyball. But I would. It just, you know, if I'm in Newport Beach and I have a baseball club and I have a bunch of parents paying, and I've had a bunch of parents paying me a lot of money, and I run this club and this is my livelihood and they're paying all this, and I've got a travel team, and a couple of black guys or Hispanic guys come in, they don't have the money. Am I going to play them over these other parents' kids who've come through my system, who have been doing this for years, who have funded me, who made my system big? Probably not. Maybe if they're clearly better, where I just can't make an excuse, yeah. But if they're equal, am I going to give this guy a chance? Probably not, because they don't bring the assets to the table the other person does, etc. So it's just something that's got to get figured out. But my whole point is this. They're fun. If you look at Willie Mays, you look at even the Negro Leagues, like Satchel Paige, you look at these guys, you look at Reggie Jackson. The African American community, at least growing up, embraced baseball. It was phenomenal. We had heroes, we had people, and you don't see that anymore. That's all I'm saying. You don't really see that. It's the numbers are limited. But the athletes are definitely out there and they're better. So the fact that the numbers are lower doesn't make any sense. That's what I'm saying. The number, you can't tell me the athletes aren't out there.
Yeah, definitely. We'll get more into different other parts and ideas about this in future episodes, and we're also hoping to bring some future guests on as well that would have their own personal thoughts and opinions on it. Maybe give more up-to-date ideas about what's going on in the African American community in baseball and other sports. So thank you again for tuning into this podcast, and stay tuned for some future episodes.
All right, Alexander, I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you. Yep.